So, not much worth listening on the news today. It's all insane. Anyways, this is the original AM radio out of my 1966 Mustang. And I don't normally do radio videos. I leave that to Shango 66. He is far more amazing with radios than most people that I know. And he does fantastic videos. So check him out if you're interested in radio restoration or really radio revivals or television revivals. His channel's great. Anyways, but I do want to cover this. This is not exactly radio repair. This radio actually works fine. I've got it up on the bench right now. I've got it wired up with a test speaker that I have. I do radio work, so I've got the equipment to work on radios. But this radio works fine. As you can see. But I don't want to remove the original radio from the car, but I do want to be able to listen to my music. You know, there's a lot of retro sound radios and stuff out there. I like the look of the original. Those radios are plastic crap, as you would call them. You know, I just don't want to put one of those in here. I like this radio. And yes, you can configure it to put an audio input in, which if you do that, you could actually hook up a Bluetooth unit to it too. So I think that there's Bluetooth units you can buy out there for, you know, $20 or so. I'm sure there's one that's probably 12 volt, and you could stuff it in the glove box and hook it into the audio input that we're going to be doing here. And it would give you Bluetooth on your 1966 radio. So I do have the schematic for this. I looked it up. It's in the SAMs. If you're familiar with antique radios, SAMs is where all the info is for all the schematics for all this antique stuff and vintage stuff. So there is a SAMs on it. I have it. Essentially what we're going to be doing is tapping into the volume control. We're going to be interrupting the RF side of the radio, and we're going to be inserting our audio signal into the amplification side of the radio. Not difficult to do. I'm going to show you what components we need. In this case, I'm going to get I wouldn't call it fancy, but I'm going to be interrupting the radio side with a switch and inserting my audio signal in its place. And the switch will be able to switch it back and forth. It'll be like a input versus radio switch is what it's going to be. I'm just going to use a toggle switch for it. You can do it without doing that. If your signal is high enough, you can overcome the RF side. I don't like doing that because then there's still static in the background and stuff. So I'd rather put a switch on it. The switch is probably going to end up in the glove box. I'm not sure. I'm just, in this video, I'll make a harness for it, something that'll allow me to kind of be flexible with where I put the switch. So anyways, we're going to dig into this. We're going to start with opening it up, and I'm going to take a look and see how I want the wires to come in, and I'm going to see if it actually works. I actually have only done this on like console radios and tabletop radios, antique stuff, that, you know, tube stuff. This is actually germanium PNP transistors, which that's a whole other world right there. They don't really make those anymore. So I've never done it on a car radio before, but we're going to do it here. Let's tear into this thing, and I'll show you what components you need. It's not complicated and it's not expensive. Certainly to add just a 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter audio, it's very simple. And so anyways, we're going to hook this up and test it first. I'll show you that, and then we'll do the final kind of neat install of it. All right, so we're doing a little test right here. I tore the radio apart, actually further apart than you really need to. There are two pieces to the case. There's the bottom half that the radio actually attaches to, and then there's the top cover right here. That's actually the easiest piece to get off. And now that I know kind of how this works, I could have done this and I probably will do it this way, but I probably could have done it only from the top. Right here, this comes out of the audio detector diode in the circuit. That's what this white wire is. It's number 14 on the schematic if you wanted to look it up. Most people are probably just going to want to copy what I've done, but right here, the audio detector It comes out right there. It goes down, then it goes down to the, and I actually circled it on the schematic even before I printed it. We're interrupting that wire. Now you could just merge it there and tune the radio to a dead station, you know, but you'll get static in the radio with that. So I'm going to actually put a single throw double pole switch, or is it? I think that's what I ordered. I have to think about that for a second. But I did order a switch for it where I'm going to be able to switch between the audio detected by the AM RF side or via what is going to be spliced in. My clip lead came off there as a test. Or switch between that and this 1/8 inch audio cable. And I'm going to show you how to merge the left and the right channels so you get stereo. We're going to put some resistors on that as well. I don't have it on there right now, but I will. And then right here, this is a capacitor. This is a 0.1 microfarad capacitor. And the reason that you do this is if there's any DC voltage on the other side, this will isolate it because capacitors only allow AC to go through, or in this case, the audio signal to go through. So we want to block any DC voltage from the radio from being able to go back to the source, which is your phone or whatever. So capacitance is not fussy, 0.047, 0.1, whatever you got laying around, that'll work fine for this. So this is just a test that I'm doing. I'm injecting it here, which is on the volume control right here. So I've disconnected this and I've connected it right here. And now I have audio. I'm not going to play it very long because copyright hits pretty quick, but you can see I've got it hooked up through my phone and I'm just playing K-Surf Oldies right now, which is a good app too if you guys want good oldies. So I'm just playing that from my phone into the circuit right there, and that's all you really need to do. It gives you the ability to use the volume control, and so we're going to go ahead and interrupt this like we've got it here. I'm going to bring the wires out of the radio though. I'm probably going to find a hole that it's already got, and if there isn't one, I'm going to drill one in it. Probably just use the holes that are in it, maybe put a grommet in there or something. I'm going to bring them out, and then I'm going to feed it all into a switch. That's going to allow me to switch back and forth between AM and this input. Okay, so we're going to take this step by step now. Now that I know that it's going to work. I figured it would, but you know, I just wanted to double check, make sure there wasn't anything funky that I needed to figure out. So what I've done so far is I've interrupted this wire right here, which right here, I talked about this before. This is the wiper, what you'd call the wiper on the volume pot, okay? If you follow it back, you're going to see it comes off of this diode right here. This is the detector for the RF, right? I already talked about that. Just want to make sure I'm very clear on it. That is where we're going to interrupt and insert our audio. So like I said, if you want to go real basic and simple with this, you could insert your signal and leave this hooked up if you want. You don't have to put in the switch like I'm doing. You just tune the radio to a quiet area on the dial, and you can insert your audio and it'll well overcome everything. I can still hear some of the static on there. I don't like it, so I'm going to put the switch in. I will draw on here what it's going to look like when I get done, but we're just going to do this kind of as a visual right here, okay? Once again, this is going to that wiper on the volume pot. This was originally there, okay? So what's going to happen is I need to bring another wire out of here as the ground. Now, you can pick up the ground anywhere because it's just the vehicle ground. The audio signal ground is the vehicle ground, or the 12-volt ground. But I'm going to bring it out of the radio so it's kind of neat and clean. The next thing I'm going to do, now that I've inserted, this is just a piece of wire. That's all this is, okay, is I'm going to solder a ground wire onto the chassis or pick up off of one of these screws a ground, okay? And then I'm going to extend this wire, and I'm also going to bring it out. Now I'm going to bring it all out through a hole in the radio somewhere. It looks like there's a couple of holes over here where I might be able to bring everything out of the side right there. I won't even have to drill a hole in it. So I want a ground. I want the signal input to the amplifier. I want the AM signal. And I'm going to want a wire coming back in from the switch, which is going to be the audio signal. Now I'm going to have to do something special right here because this is a stereo signal right here. I'll show you that in a little bit. So we're going to have to bring that in. Actually, we're not even going to have to bring that in now that I think about it. I'm just going to bring the AM signal out to the switch. This is the audio signal coming in, and I need a ground. That's all I need coming out of here. Then the switch will handle the rest of it. Okay, so this is just, let's simplify it right now. I've taken this out. I've inserted a piece of wire here. That's step one. I'm going to show you step two next. All right, step two here. Stay with me. So you'll remember that I said that this wire was the AM side, right? The AM feed from the RF. Okay, I've replaced that wire with this yellow wire here, and I brought it out along with the white wire, which is the audio input to the volume switch. Then I've also got a ground wire here. I've just attached it to the radio because I want this harness. This is going to end up being a harness. I want this to stay with the radio. The next thing that I'm going to do, I still don't have the switch. I'm waiting for it. It should be dropped off. It should be delivered today, and it's not here yet. The next thing I'm going to do is I've got my audio feed cable here stripped already, okay? The shield is always the bare wire that's inside, and then there's going to be, if it's a stereo cable like this one is, it's going to have two, a left and a right, okay? Two wires and the shield. The shield's going to go to the ground, okay? That's because, like, remember I said before, the ground of the chassis is the same as the audio ground, okay? So that's going to go to the ground of the chassis. And then each one of these is going to get a 150 ohm resistor. These are actually 120, not fussy. Again, 120, 150 ohms is fine. Basically, we're going to connect these resistors one to each of these feeds, and then on the other side, I'm going to tie these together. And I think the reason that you do this, as I recall, is that way you don't, it's got high resistance on either, on the left and the right of the feed, but it's lower resistance going out to the, to where you're going to feed your signal into. That's why you do this. At least I think it is. Somebody will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how you combine a stereo signal to mono, right? That's the whole purpose of this. We're combining stereo to mono because this AM radio is mono. It's got one speaker. It's got one channel. So we have to combine that. That's why you do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do this next. I'm going to get these soldered up, and I'm going to heat shrink this real nice so it's insulated. Okay, so as I was saying, the 220 ohm resistors are right here. I've also soldered a small lead for the ground on here because I don't know exactly how this is all going to play out until I figure out how it's going to, where the switch is going to go. But in the meantime, I wanted to make up this end of it. So just like I said, I tied these two together, right? So this is our mono audio output from your audio source now, okay? I've slid a big piece of shrink tube over the entire thing. Next, remember the capacitor I was talking about. This is 0.1 microfarad capacitor. By the way, these have a voltage rating. You don't need to worry about that because there's 12 volts or something here. These particular ones are rated to 250 volts. So they're plenty. And really the only thing that changes is the voltage rating goes up on these is the size of them. They physically get larger, but at 12 volts, there's not much to be concerned about. So anyways, I'm going to solder that here. That way, remember our signal, this isolates DC from our signal. That's what we're doing here. So I'm going to solder that there. Then I'm going to bring this piece of tube all the way up to here, okay, with everything in it. That way this is all nicely packed and supported. Then all I have to do is solder a lead on the end of this capacitor, and I can hook that up to my switch, which will feed into the selector. The switch is the selector. It'll feed into whichever one I want, AM or audio signal. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get that soldered up, get this piece of shrink tube shrunk on there, get a piece of wire soldered on the end here, probably put some heat shrink on that as well. And that should make it all look, pretty professional. All right, so hopefully I haven't confused you guys too much, but we've got the capacitor installed. I chose red just because it was another color that I had. Probably not the best idea because red is usually, your hot lead, but it's what I had. So basically, the way that I have this set up, red is my feed for my audio from whatever audio source I have. Yellow is my AM source, and white is the audio amplifier input. So pretending that I had a switch here, which I still don't have, it's simply going to switch the white either to the red or the white to the yellow. So it's going to be white and yellow would be audio amplifier and AM radio. White and red would be audio amplifier and audio source. So right now I've got the red going to the white right now. That's going to give me my audio source, which is feeding out of my cell phone right now. So we got audio there. Now I'm going to disconnect it and I'm going to hook it up to the AM side. There we go. Now I've got AM radio.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that Pence was the one
So,
that directly authorized it.
Real simple once you think about it. Back to my audio input. And I can listen to my Beach Boys or my K-Surf that I actually really like, LA Oldies. That's it. That's as simple as it gets. So that's the electrical side of it. Now I kind of got to figure out where I'm going to put the switch. I was thinking I would probably mount the switch in the glove box and probably put the cable in the glove box. That's probably a good place for it. Maybe my center console, because I have a center console in this car. So I'm just going to set the loom up to be long enough for that. So I'm going to get these wires fed into the switch. The switch will replace this jumper that I've got here basically. There's going to be, 3 things hooked up to that switch. It's going to be, this way is going to be AM radio, and that way is going to be my, audio source, my 1/8-inch plug-in. So I'll let you know what that looks like, but at least now you know how to. The hardest part is knowing what you got to do inside the radio. You've got to tap into that volume pot, and that's where you want to feed in your audio source. So I showed you how to do that inside the radio there. And as soon as I get the switch, I'll make sure I tell you how to hook up the switch. But it's real simple. Now the next thing I'm going to do is draw it on the schematic to show you what it looks like. That way you kind of have a visual. So I've gone ahead and drawn a very simple schematic of what we've done here. This is what it originally looked like. That's why I drew it in a dotted line and I put an X through it. The detector feed for the AM radio used to go directly into the center of the volume pot. Don't worry about what these other 2 leads are going to. That's part of the radio circuit. You don't need to know that. I just drew them because I wanted you to know it was a pot. Pots have 3 leads. Okay? By the way, the pot is the volume control. That's what turns it up or down. Okay? We've gone ahead and we've done this. We've extended to a single pole double throw switch. So what that means is right now I'm showing it in the off position. Depending on the single pole double throw switch, it may or may not have an off position. In this case, I'm showing it with an off position just for simplicity's sake, so you know that it's a switch. Okay? In this position, this switch will close, this one will remain open, and we will feed the AM into the audio amp, into the volume switch which goes to the audio amp. If I switch the switch over to the other side, this will remain open, this will remain closed. Now I'm going to feed in my audio circuit that I've drawn right here, which, remember, I had to combine the left and the right channels. I put a capacitor in just in case to isolate any DC voltage that may exist here. We don't want to feed that back into our connection, right? So that's very rudimentary how this is drawn on here. I might edit this as well, but I think you pretty much get the gist of it. That what I just drew right there is this. This is the AM detector feed going into the audio switch. So remember, that X that I drew is in the middle of this line right here. Now I did it by soldering into the board. You could certainly take this wire and cut it in the top, the wire that was in there that I was showing you, that I've removed. You could actually cut this and insert it there. It might be easier to do that than taking the whole radio apart like I did. But I wanted to do that because it was just cleaner to solder the wires to the board. So you could certainly do it the way that I did it. So again, here's a real basic schematic. So I'm just waiting for this switch to get here. But that is how you would go ahead and hook this up to have an external audio source. Now, what you can do at this point, there's some folks that are asking about Bluetooth. You can get a Bluetooth player that's got an 1/8-inch audio output on it that runs on 12 volts. Maybe you get a cigarette lighter one, or one that you can feed 12 volts into externally. And then you could have Bluetooth, and that'd be real slick, actually. So that's an option as well. I think I'm just going to stick with the 1/8-inch audio input. I might, if I find a Bluetooth unit that I like, maybe I'll get it. But, just in this case, I'm just going to plug my phone into it. So anyways, that's a real basic circuit right there on how to utilize your original AM radio, but have a audio input like a more modern vehicle would. And of course, in perfect fashion, I would forget to show you one thing. This is the shield, or the ground, but it's a shield the way that it's wired. Well, actually, it's a ground, even though it looks like a shield. Don't get confused. Okay, the ground for these signals, the third wire, the one that I showed you, the black one, that's got to go to the 12-volt ground, or the ground of the chassis, which is this guy right here, and this guy right here, right? The black one. You got to make sure you ground that, because that's the audio. That's the other side. That's a negative side of the audio signal. You got to have that grounded. So I forgot to draw that. Went ahead and drew it here. So again, that's the modified, high-tech, super AutoCAD approved SolidWorks 3D drawing is right here. So the switch finally arrived. I got it wired up. So this would be my audio source, AM source, going out to the radio amp. I loomed it similar to what is actually in the car, the way that they loomed wires back then, and the way that a lot of European cars are done. This is a legitimate way to loom the wires. I used Tessa tape. This stuff is really good. It may kind of seem cheesy at first if you think about it, because it looks like electrical tape, but it certainly is not. It's a fabric tape. It's very sticky, and it's a really good way to make a nice loom. And this matches kind of what's in the car already. So I thought that'd be a real neat way to do it. So I went ahead and I loomed it up that way. So I've still got to figure out where I'm going to put the switch. I don't know if I'm going to make a bracket for it and put it in the glove box or in the center console. Not sure. Somewhere where the line, that I've got here is like 4 feet long. Somewhere where I can still access this. I think the glove box might be a good place for it. Once I figure that out, I'll go ahead and I'll show you guys that, and I'll show you where I end up mounting this. So the next step is going to be reinstalling the radio. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that tomorrow. It's getting dark and cold out. But anyways, this is what the finished product looks like, and I tested it out, and it works real well. Well, so I lied. I decided to put it back in tonight. Had a little extra time. So it's up and running. I got it installed. I got the wiring. That length of wire was just right. I made it a couple of feet. I put the switch in the glove box. I haven't marked it yet, but the up position is for Bluetooth and down is radio. So it's in Bluetooth right now. So I've got my K-Surf going. If I want to switch it, I just flip it over, and now I'm listening to KNX News on the AM. So this radio is great. It still works. The presets still work and everything. But then I can just throw it on over, and I can listen to my music. So overall, this only took me a couple of hours, if that. I just ran the wire down here. I've got some spare real estate, with the console and everything. I may put a Bluetooth unit in it, but this is fine. I can plug my phone into this and listen to whatever I want, and it still sounds great. It's got the original speaker in it, and for mono, it's not bad. Also, what I didn't mention too was while I was in here, I lubed the controls. I used Deoxit, which is a cleaner for the pots, as well as the selectors. This was all gummed up, and they were really slow to pop back out and stuff, so I got that all cleaned up. So the radio's working just tip-top now. So anyways, hopefully this is helpful. It's kind of specific for the Mustangs. I think there's other videos out there where somebody's already done this before, but You know, there's always room for one more. And maybe you pick up some things that I did in my video that other people don't. So, anyways, just wanted to share this with everyone, and hopefully you find it helpful.